Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, Carolyn Hayes, film critic and journalist. And this is one of my episodes for the 2023 Sundance Film Festival. And today I am joined by three special guests to talk about their film White Ant. I am joined by writer and director Shalini Adnani. So, I'm also joined by editor Anna Meller and music designer Hollie Buhagiar.
Yeah.
Hollie Buhagiar, and we're gonna talk about the film White Ant. So I'm calling it an experimental short because I love how the sound design and the visuals of this film work really well together. It's kind of spooky and it's kind of creepy, unexpected to me anyway. It kind of felt almost like a sci-fi alien film. I'll get into it. You guys will understand what I mean when I do it. But so this is a man who goes home to Mumbai, and his house is overrun by termites. And I, being from the Caribbean, have seen up close and personal what damage termites can do to houses. So I kind of understood where you were going with this film, Shalini. So we'll get into that. But as usual, before we go into the conversations, I like to have my guests say a bit about themselves. So Shalini will have you go first, and then Hollie and Anna. So talk a bit about what got all three of you involved in filmmaking, and then how you came together to work on White Ant.
So my background wasn't in filmmaking. My parents are Indian and they migrated to Chile. And so I didn't grow up in a place where like filmmaking was very common. And I did my bachelor's and I studied political philosophy and like Latin American studies. So it was completely different. And I just slowly got into it because a friend sort of asked me to write a script once because she knew that I could write. And then I tried it, and then I sort of went on set, and I kind of realized I really liked it. And then I ended up going to London to study film. So that's kind of how I got to film, and I've kind of never turned my back on it. And then White Ant came around because actually I was working on my feature and I was developing my feature, and in a way I took a step back and I realized my feature is also set in India. And I realized I had never worked in India. I'd been there every summer, but I'd never worked there. And I wanted to do something there that, in a way, got the team together for the feature and got me ready. It was kind of in preparation for something. So that's when I decided to write White Ants, and it's really based on observing my father going back to India every year and sort of experiencing his ancestral home being abandoned, and then it was like separate occasions. I sort of like pieced things together, but he did have to deal with a termite infestation, and it was pretty disgusting, and no one could be in the house for a while. And I think it really shook everyone that was in the house, because suddenly they realized that there was like flies, and there was like things flying all over the hallways. And I think that when they realized that they had been living with these termites for basically years, and they had only been seeing the effects like, years later, I think it just provoked something kind of scary in people. Yeah.
Yeah. And Hollie and Anna?
Yeah, so I kind of accidentally, I think, got into film. I've been doing music since the dawn of time and space, really. Like before I could talk or walk, I was playing something. But yeah, I was just studying music production, so it was composition and technology, but kind of more on a songwriter level. And someone just asked me to score a film, and it was just like a light bulb moment. My mom's actually a painter as well, so I've always had the visual arts in my life. And as soon as they kind of combined, I just stumbled into it in the most unexpected way, but everything combined in the most perfect way that I don't know how I didn't foresee beforehand. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into film. And then after that, I specialized in it and went to the National Film and TV School, and didn't really look back ever since. And me and Shalini, before White Ant, we'd kind of worked together on a few other projects that were really brilliant and really fun. And yeah, we met through a mutual film connection, and that's kind of how we started working together. And now we're here.
Yeah, so I grew up in Budapest in Hungary, and when I was a kid, we had one TV channel, and I think we had about one film a year that came out in the cinemas that were suitable for children. And my parents would take me, I think, every Christmas to the cinema once a year, and it was this huge thing that I was always looking forward to, and I just fell in love with cinema then. And then later on, once I was a bit older, I could get hold of films from all over the world, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I moved to London to study editing and started editing really. And I got introduced to Shalini through another director, a mutual friend of ours, and her producers. And she sent me the treatment and the script, and also Hollie's score, because Hollie's already written something to the script at that point to say, are you interested in this? And I was cutting a feature at the time, but I read it and I said, oh, wow, this is just something I absolutely have to do, because you could really get a sense for what the film is going to be like from the material she sent me. And I said, please wait for me to finish this and let me edit it, because I love it so much. And so I was very happy to be involved.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, and we did wait for Anna. We had to we didn't start editing right away. We sort of waited because I really wanted to get a chance to work with Anna.
Yeah, this film is like it's very different, and it's very I call it experimental, because like the way how you use sound and also the editing, because like a lot of the sounds intercut over the scenes, like you'll have the character who's the man who is not named. Very interestingly, he's not referred to by a name. He's just referred to as sir by the house workers. But as he moves through like the house and the spaces, like the music plays over, like there's like transitions with scenes, and then you just have this creepy sound of the termites. And as soon as I finished watching the shorts, like these were literally the shorts in the short program 3 were the first things that I watched for Sundance. And yours was one of the first emails that I sent out, Shalini, requesting interviews, because I was like, this film is creepy, and I was like, I need to speak to the creatives. Not expecting it to be as creepy and as unsettling as it is, but like what the three of you did, I think you kind of added, like, I called it a sci-fi as well, because it just made me think of aliens. It made me think not only Alien the film, but just like these termites could be considered aliens. And the sounds that they make, like the exterminator, he calls it a tok-toki. And while he's doing this, because he's like, they're knocking and they're communicating with the queen, I'm like, it also sounds like a sound from like a 5th or 6th dimension, So I want you guys to talk about, as you were like, when you were like, Shalini, after you conceptualized the film, like just coming together with what you wanted the sound of the film to be, because it has a very distinct quality to the sound. Like as I said, it sounds like very alienish, and it sounds like it's not of Earth, and it sounds very creepy and spooky. So when the three of you were coming together and you decide this is what this film is going to look like, this is what it's going to sound like, what was that conversation like?
I think I always wanted to play with the sort of texture of the film, which was like shot on film. It feels very old and nostalgic, and this sort of newness, like I always I like to juxtapose like tradition and modernity, and so that's why the termites feel almost robotic, and I guess, like you said, the term sci-fi. And so with the sound and the music, it was similar. We always spoke about sort of creating metallic sort of sounds. And me and Hollie started, we sort of worked together on the music before we even went on shoot. So I knew that there was going to be this sort of termite animated sequence. And I was talking to Hollie and sort of sharing a lot of references. And she actually composed something for that sequence before we went out and shot it. And that sequence, I believe, Hollie, correct me if I'm wrong, I was like really obsessed with this one instrument, which is
we both were.
Yes. It's called a morchung in Spanish. What's amazing about it, it's in Spanish, it's called a birimbau. But what's amazing about it is it's an indigenous instrument that exists both in Asia and Latin America, and in different continents, completely different tribes. But both of these regions just had that same instrument, and it's like it's a metallic instrument that you put on in your mouth, and it sort of harps. So it has something really interesting in that it's very earthy and organic, because obviously you're using your mouth, but it's super metallic. And that was kind of our starting off point, and we started playing around with sounds. And to be honest, in the early days, the sound of that segment and of the entire film was actually way more heightened. And it wasn't until we were in the edit that we realized, okay, this might be too much. like I might have to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, we were having fun. It's definitely with the music, I think we were definitely trying to connect with the sort of like traditional. That instrument is actually quite ancient. It's over 1,500 years old, something like that, and try and modernize it. So a lot of most of the music really is kind of forged out of live instruments, and then processing it and seeing what can be done to make it feel electronic, make it feel give it that metallic sound, and kind of have it exist within the two worlds. So yeah, that was definitely the intention we had.
Yeah, the instruments, I don't think I'm familiar with that one, but the thing is with the music, as you were talking, you kind of also made me think of how it could also play as like an industrial sound in a way, like, you know, like because and which is interesting because like termites, they attack wood, you know, they can't attack metal, but the music itself has this kind of like an industrial feel and sound to it. So you have like this wood and this metal juxtaposition going on, which is also kind of interesting why I associate it with sci-fi, because we don't necessarily associate sci-fi elements with wood, you know, but which I think is it's kind of cool and interesting. I think I like that when you have a film like this, where like for you as the composer and music designer, like you're thinking we're gonna go way outside the box to come up with the instruments, because who would think of a 1,500-year-old instrument for a film essentially set in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, well, Shalini would.
This is one thing I love about working with Hollie. I sort of go on like weird adventures in India and like bring back instruments. I think I brought back this flute that was made out of sap.
Oh my gosh.
Which I love. And I sort of handed it to her, and I was like, look, they told me that you can't play it. Like, you just don't know how to play it. It's impossible, but I know that you'll be able to. And like, I mean, even when I've been around your studio, Hollie, you've got like, you know, it's, you know, like, I don't know what, like strings of pianos and like big. And so
oddities, and it's becoming a problem. I don't have much space left.
Could you play the flute?
That flute, yeah. I feel like, you remember I just put it straight in my mouth, and it was just like, it made a noise, and we were like, oh. Yeah, it was
definitely experimenting with music and sounds is something that I really enjoy, and you know, and Hollie also you know, does the best with it, so it's amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think it's one of those things that for me it really inspires creativity, and you never know quite what you're going to get, and I feel like those happy accidents are kind of what makes the brain kind of like explode with ideas. And yeah, that's I think how we got our score, really, starting with the mochang and then expanding out and just playing.
Right. And for you, Anna, like with the editing of this film, the editing is very smooth. Like there's no shortcuts, you know, like the scenes transition very seamlessly, right? And like it could almost feel like a one long take. And the only reason, you know, it's not a one long take is because like it goes from like night to day, then back to day again, because like the character, he's in the house over the period of it. I was thinking maybe like a weekend or a few days. But like, talk a bit about the editing for this film, because it's like as I said, it kind of made me think creepy, because for a lot of horror films in particular, like editing plays a very important role in like keeping the pace of the film even, and keeping the tension that the audience would feel while we're watching the film. Because like for me, editing, like if a scene doesn't stay long enough on a certain element, it just feels very truncated, like you're not being able to sit in the moment. But for the audience, we get to sit with this character as he's exploring this house, like it's like he's never actually been there before. It's almost like he was plopped into another world, and he's like, to me, I think that's the way the actor plays it, where he's like he's feeling this house like he's never been there. It's like an alien world to him.
I'm very glad to say that, because that was the intention. I think we didn't want to make it, we didn't want to make it something, in terms of the edit, definitely, we wanted to give it this sort of, the film, we wanted to be very experiential, and I think we wanted it to flow, and we wanted you to be able to view it, to be able to sort of just settle into it and really kind of, start thinking and start feeling things that aren't necessarily suggested very directly by the film. And I certainly didn't want to kind of impose too much basiness or cuts that were very noticeable and rhythmic in a way that was self-serving. I think it and the other element of that is that the sound is taking such a it's almost more important than, I know I wouldn't say that because the image is so great, but it's on equal footing, I would say, with the image. So we wanted that to be a big part of it, and also we didn't want it to be a horror. Shalini told me very early on that she doesn't want this to be a horror, so we were trying to stay away from any genre influence in that sense as well. And Shalini and Adric have been very specific in the way they decided to shoot the film as well. So it really was quite easy to make it seamless. That's the other thing I must say, because they really thought it through. It was shot on 16mm film, and it was very, very beautifully conceived and shot, and which made it very simple to make it fluid.
I just wanted to add something about the edit, and sort of talking about the horror. Funny enough, after the first cut of this, I did show it to some of my producers, and the first thing they said to me said, you need to make horror in the future. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not naturally drawn to horror, but I think I do like the tension that it creates, I think. But we did have another character in the edit, and the film did at one point feel more like it was a character development, and it was more of a character journeying into this village, and he sort of encountered his neighbor. And I ultimately felt like I wanted something that was more experiential, that you could just go into, completely immerse yourself in experience, and sort of come out and then try and figure out. I think there's something about having quite an emotional or visceral experience to something and then trying to find the logic later. So we ended up cutting out that character and focusing on sort of creating that tension in the film.
No, I think cutting the character was good, because having the film be about this one character, to me, that really makes it more personal and more contained and more. I think that really brings home the tension, because like it's funny that like you said, Anna, like she didn't want it to be a horror, but like to me it feels very much horror-ish, or like very close to the genre of horror, because as I said, like I've seen personally what termites can do, and like being in a house that is being literally destroyed from the inside, like that it's creepy, because when you're in a house with termites, like the wood starts to actually decompose, and it'll like start to literally rain down on you, and it's like the decomposing wood, and it's also the termite poop, but like it's true. I found that out in secondary school. My teacher was like, "Oh yeah, it's like that's like their poop." I'm like, haha, good to know. But it's like you're in a place that is, and that's falling apart, and that's scary. I think that's scary, like to think that you're in a house that could collapse around you at any minute. And then with the sound design is like you're hearing these termites, and they're communicating, and they're communicating with their queen, which again kind of made me think of aliens. And it's just like you have these little invaders that are destroying the remnants of your ancestry, your home, like when your family home is gone, like there's like that's the last tangible thing of your family. And there's this scene with the chair where the caretaker Bunty, like they bring a chair and they said, "Oh, we kept this chair for you," and at the end he has to burn that chair, because you can't keep wood. Like the thing with termites is if they have a colony in a house, like any type of wood you have to destroy. right? And like they can't keep it. And so I saw that scene as kind of poignant, where it's like he can't even have this one chair, you know, he can't even have this, and that's horrific. That's when you think about it, like this is his family heirlooms, and he doesn't have these now, and he's all alone, and that's scary, like to think he has to go through all of this alone.
Yeah, I think I also definitely was interested in this idea of I think the way that we ignore nature around us and the way that it sort of secretly can creep up and take over us. I think, you know, humans think that they're so powerful, but you know, when something's left behind, it literally will take a matter of like 10 years, and sort of nature will take over.
Yeah, like the nature will reclaim the space. Like if you can have a house is like, and the funny thing with me is like the house got taken over by termites, but it could have also been just the vegetation, and could have reclaimed the house too. Like he would come back and the house would be overtaken by vegetation, and that happens. Like, you know, like in the Caribbean, you can be walking down like a country road, and you'll just see a house that's just like covered in grass, or like a tree would just grow out of the middle of the house, because like nature, to quote Jeff Bloom in Jurassic Park, nature finds a way. But it's true, it does. Like, you know, and like nature will always find a way to reclaim its space, especially when humans are invasive. Like, you can walk down the street and see a plant sprouting up through a concrete pavement, you know, like everything we make is eventually gonna fall apart. Like nothing we make is permanent. And I think that's what the film is also saying to me, is like this home that his family built is not permanent, you know, it's kind of ephemeral. And speaking about ephemeral, like the film also has a very particular feel. You said you shot it on 60 millimeter film, but there's a couple scenes that I thought were interesting. Like there in one part of the house, there's these Christmas lights. And I thought that there was it's such an odd juxtaposition to everything else around the house. Because everything else in the house is mahogany, it's rattan, it's like attached and this kind of stuff. But you have this part of the house that's more modern because it's electrical color lights. And then when he takes a walk in the field, and this scene kind of reminds me of this cartoon we used to watch years ago, and it was something that I read reference in Romance, but it's called The Will-O-the-Wisp. You know, like this very eerie light that floats over like bodies of water, and it's a mist, and and those two things, you have the blue lights in the field, and then these blue and these pretty color lights in the house. I want you to talk a bit about those, because I thought that they were like this very interesting input of color into the film, because the color palette of the film is kind of muted and neutral colors, but you got these two scenes and these two different spaces where you have like just bright colors.
Yeah. So with Adric, my cinematographer, we actually walked around Mumbai and also the villages, and really observed the way that light worked in the villages. And you know, it is a country that obviously, you know, in some ways it's, you know, still hasn't modernized. You know, there are still loads of slums and things like that. But one thing that has really shifted is lights. So LED lights are everywhere. And what we did do is we observed a lot of the houses. And one thing that you can see in house after house is that there's always a little temple.
Okay, I was wondering if it was an altar. Okay.
And it doesn't matter like how run down a house is, there's going to be a little altar, a little temple with like bright lights. So we did want to keep it grounded in reality and make it authentic, but that was one way for us to integrate the color. I mean, from the beginning, I wanted to play with this sort of like the tradition, or the sort of like nostalgia of the 16 millimeter with more modern lights and elements. So it was very intentional to sort of use LED lights in the lighting around, like outside the house at night. And then the altar came up as a solution in a way that we were like, this is real for the houses there, and it would help us, you know, keep this sort of game that we're playing with like modern lights and more traditional houses. And then with the lights in the field, again, I wanted to play with this idea of like modernity entering really rural spaces. And, you know, the lights really are about farmers in the area using light technology to keep insects and termites away. And this happens a lot in these kinds of countries where people are finding new technologies to deal with like old problems, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And Hollie, so this just occurred to me, but when you're making a film like this and like you're using like Asian instruments and like as Shalini is talking about the modern with the old, like what how fun was it for you as a composer and a sound designer to be able to find ways to get the old and the new for this film? Because like I think I imagine it would be very fun to find new ways to use, to not only to do instrumentals but also to integrate the sound of the termites, because I find they have a rhythm, like the way like the sounds the termites make in this film have a very particular rhythm to it. And it also made me think of like feedback or the crackling from a microphone, like someone, the thought I may put the note on my face on my phone, but oh my gosh, is this sci-fi film where they're trying to like, where they're communicating with extraterrestrials, and like you're trying to listen to a signal and the signal isn't coming through. So that's the sound that it made me think of, like someone trying to communicate with an outside world or with an extraterrestrial world, like 2-3 million like years away.
Yeah, I mean, the answer it was very, very fun. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the metallic sort of presence comes from as well. When you think about the electronics of the lights, and playing with those textures too. And yeah, we were very conscious of the termites and the sound, and blending the music with that so that it would work harmoniously. Because yeah, as Shalini said, we kind of started like at script stage playing around, and then we did realize, I think a lot of it was because of the sound of the termites, that we needed to kind of clear the way for them a bit so they could have their presence. And it's an interesting one because they are quite percussive and quite rhythmical, and the mochang that we mentioned is also technically a percussion instrument. So there's like a lot of really like subtle percussions that were played around with, and in many ways they kind of really worked well together, and then also had their own presence, so they had their own identity too. And I think, yeah, the score was kind of figuring out how to let those identities sing and also connect with our lead character but not give too much away, so that each viewer can kind of come to the film and kind of interpret in a way that's personal to them. So it's really interesting to hear your experience with termites, I think, because I imagine that's probably what's bringing the the intense reaction with the
very intense, because I for one don't really like bugs. I am not a fan of bugs. I am not a fan of roaches at all. And like people think I'm joking, but I would rather snakes than roaches or bugs. I've touched snakes. I've held snakes. Snakes don't bother me. They feel a little bit weird to hold because of their scales, but roaches, no. So like, and the thing is, I think a lot of people don't know is like termites fly. And, and so like when they fly, we call them, in Barbados, we call them flying ants when they start to fly. And that's when like that's when you really start to actually worry about them, because they come out in the rainy season. And because they come up because of the humidity and the wood starts to get like wet and stuff. And because like in the Caribbean, in Barbados, all of our houses are either made from wood and concrete. So like the house, the foundation, everything is concrete, but our ceilings are made from wood. So we use like hardwood, like mahogany, purple heart, green heart. And we use those particularly because termites can't really eat through purple heart or green heart because the wood is so tough. But like the older houses are made from like regular pine wood and stuff. So like the older houses in the neighborhoods, they're the ones that get attacked by the termites. So when you you literally be walking down the street and you just see like, it's just like your vision is obscured because there's so many flying ants, or the termites are just like flying. And when you get it's so funny, but when you're walking down when you're going home, you just hear people shutting their windows because you don't want it to come in. And the only way to get rid of them once they start flying is like we take a basin of water or like a bowl of water and put it up to the light, because they fly into the water from the reflection. And that's the only, like, you can spray them, but like you don't want to be trapped in a house filled with like insect spray. So the most economical and environmentally safe way to kill them is just take a bucket of water, stand on a chair for literally a half an hour up to the light, and have them fly into the water. So like, yes, personal really with termites.
Hearing you talk about it, honestly, the fear's starting to set in for me. So I understand.
Listen, once they start flying, it's like no, because you don't want to fly into your hair. No, like no, they fly into your food, your drink. No.
Did you expect them to start suddenly? Did you expect that to be the ending of our film, that they suddenly all start flying?
I was not surprised when because like I was like, yeah, no, like once they reach that stage, the house is theirs. Like it's like there's no saving it. Either burn it or watch it just like fall apart bit by bit, which is sad, which is the sadness of the film. Like this film is talking about this character. His like I was saying, like his ancestral home is gone, and like once it comes to when it comes to that point, like there's no reclaiming it, you know, there's no taking it back. Like everything is lost. And it kind of, I don't know why, but this film also made me think of colonization and colonialism.
You're not the first person to say this.
Pardon?
You're not the first person to say this.
Oh, really? Yeah, and it just made me think of colonialism, like how when the British arrived in India, like they're just like an invading force. They're an invading parasite. And once they arrived, not only in India, but in like the Caribbean and Latin America and South America, like once again, we have not been able to get rid of them.
That's so interesting. This is my favorite interpretation of the film, because I don't think I thought of that. I think I just write from like a very responsive place. But a few people thought that it really was talking about colonialism, especially because we talk about the termites communicating to the queen and all of these things like that. And I love that interpretation. I'm down for it, basically.
Yeah, because there's another scene where this is one of the few times he interacts with other people. Like he's walking through the town, the town, and he's listening to these farmers talking about their crops are being destroyed, and they're and like one of the men say, like, every year we go through this, like it's like so we try to find a solution, and like nothing really seems to work. And the thing is like that's I think that's also the thing about nature. Like nature, as I was saying, but nature not only will find a way, but like I think as human beings, we don't learn how to live in harmony with nature. We try to take it over, you know, we try to like dominate it, and like and rather than trying to find ways to coexist. And it's not only with nature, but even with other people, like, you know, even like but like people who are immigrants, like I'm an immigrant, but other people in like our spaces, if you live in a building, like people will be like, I don't want to coexist with the people in the space that I live with, you know, I want to be isolated, I want to live on my own. And like we would all be better off if we learn to coexist, you know, like, oh, why can't we all just get along? But it's true. But except for termites, I don't want to get along with termites.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for you, for Hollie and Anna, for you, when you were making the film, like what kind of, because I'm thinking about my interpretation for the film, but like for the two of you, what was your interpretation for the film? Like once everything was done and you finished editing and you finished your music, and you were saying, I was seeing this when I was making it, but after the process, because you know sometimes we were making something, we can't see what it is, we can't see the end result until it's like completely finished. But for the two of you, like when you were finished, what thoughts did you have about the film at the end?
Do you know, actually I find for me it's the other way around, is I go into it with an interpretation, or I have a feeling, and by the time you finish it, it's not yours anymore. It's I really that's why I love coming to the festival and seeing other people see it and how they feel it. I think probably it will take me another 5 years to actually watch it. With every film I make, to watch it and see it as a viewer for the first time. But going into it, I think my personal connection to it was, I'm also an immigrant. I live in London, but I'm originally from Budapest. And the feeling I get when I go back to my ancestral home is very different to the one in the film. And yet the feelings, and I'm a first generation immigrant, so the feelings I have, I think, and the feelings our character has are not the same, but I can definitely relate to that process.
Yeah, similar. I'm based in London, but I'm originally from Gibraltar, and the sort of connection to going back to home. I actually find this film quite calming personally. Yeah, I just love existing in the space, and I feel like every time I rewatch it, I come out with a sort of different emotional sort of state, which is what I really love about it. I feel like depending on the mood I have going into it, I'll come out with a slightly different response. And I mean, yeah, I love that about it. It's and that's what's been so great, I think, about watching it with an audience and hearing their responses, because there's such an array. And yeah, it's amazing. It's wonderful. Can't really pinpoint a certain thing, but I connect with it on a lot of levels. Yeah.
That's the thing with film. Like sometimes it depends on where we are mentally and I think emotionally at a point in time. Like I could watch a film like for this, I watched it over twice, and like I still have the same feeling of like angst and like trepidation, and again that's possibly just again my own personal relationship with termites. But the thing is like the thing with a lot of films, like sometimes it's where you are mentally, emotionally at that point in time. Like you can feel a way about a film now, and then like 10 or even 10-15 years down the road, like you feel you have a completely different perspective on it, because it's about not only our personal relationships with the stories, but it's just like how we've grown as people, and like we learn, we grow, and like that allows us to see things from a completely different perspective. And I think also in thinking about it, the film Shalini is about that, because this character, he's what, late 50s, early 60s, and he's going back to the home, and he's seeing it in a completely different way as an adult than when he was as a child living there. And it's not only because the house is destroyed, but I think for me, I kind of read it as like he's feeling the sentimentality of seeing his home and seeing this place that he played around as a child being destroyed. And like he didn't appreciate it when he was younger, but now that it's being destroyed is when he wishes he could have he had time to appreciate it, but he doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think I was very interested in that particular age range of men and sort of first generation immigrants who I think that age range of men, they don't really have that much access to their emotions, that there's like a real disconnect. So I was really interested in also observing the emotional disconnect with the house and like trying to access exactly what he was feeling. You know, this isn't someone that has a lot of emotions, but obviously the house is falling apart, and it's like he can't help but, you know, react to what's in front of him.
Right. And the thing is where we start to see, like he starts off very curiously, and Anna, this is the interesting thing where the editing is like, as I said, some of these shots feel like they could be long takes, and it's the way he moves through the house. And I think it's interesting that he starts so curious, you know, like in almost like a child, where he takes the headphones and he puts it on, and like at night he can't sleep and he's listening to the sound of the termites. And the cat and I think it's interesting how the camera focuses on him and then on the wood, but then back on him. So for Anna, I want you to talk a bit about just like editing the scenes to give the audience a sense of where this character is at mentally, because like it moves from being curious to, I think, almost being afraid in a way. Like he's now realizing that this house could possibly collapse. So like he's realizing, yeah, this is a more serious situation than I was anticipating.
Yes, I mean, in terms of mapping that out, I can't actually take too much credit, because it really was Shalini and Adric have really sort of thought about this very much. You know, the way they were going to shoot it, and when you're going to go close and when you're going to go wide. So, of course, there's always things you will do in the edit, and there'll be moments you choose not to use, and so that to leave the emphasis on certain other moments and close-ups, and they've lost things. But what you were saying was exactly the feeling is really, you know, you have to see it in order for the immersive nature of the film, the experiential nature of the film to work. You really have to go with the character as much as you can, and he's not a type of character, I think, that a lot of us necessarily would immediately feel a connection to. But to me, actually, that childlike nature of his fascination with this device and the discovery of it. Just that was the moment when I saw him sort of looking at this device like such a geek, like a child. That was the moment that I really connected with him, and I think we definitely felt that was a key turning point in the film, and where we could go into a more subjective space, and let the sound and the termites take over and follow his journey through discovering that.
Right. Shalini, talk about the casting, because this character, that's Denzel Smith is his name. So talk a bit about the casting, because like we were saying, like for the character like this, because he's more mature and he's older, like I think is like something kind of special. You have an older, more mature character who's able to tap into like the curiosity of a child in a way, and then also be having to do a mature aspect where he's like talking with I assume his family members, and he has the responsibility of deciding what to do with his family home. So talk a bit about casting him, and how you and the actor and how you and Denzel worked with regards to portraying this character, because he doesn't talk much. Like most of his acting is in how his face relates to the situations, and like how he reacts to the space that he's in.
Yeah, so I had originally, we had one actor signed up and then last minute dropped out. So we were looking, or sort of desperately looking for someone, our shoot date was set. And I actually sent the script out to a really great Indian actor. His name is Adil Hussain. And that was our sort of, and funny enough, he was reading the script and he was on set with Denzel, and Denzel took the script from him, read it, and then contacted us and said, I am the character. And of course I believed it, but then I had a Zoom call with him, and on the Zoom call he was really interesting. I mean, Denzel's like just such a funny person to work with. He's so lovely, but he was very busy throughout the Zoom call and didn't quite interact. And I think that's when I realized that he really was the character, that he was someone that actually kind of kept himself busy and didn't quite want to sort of get to the emotional core of things. But that's exactly what we were looking for. That's really what the casting was. We sort of approached him and he's like, this is me. And after one Zoom call, I realized that it would work really well. And then we just kind of took it from there. He on set, he was incredibly collaborative and had some really great ideas. And yeah, something I always loved about him was just the sort of stoic nature of his performance. I feel like he emotes a lot with very little. And yeah, so that was really lovely. And then the other actors were either non-actors, or the inspector came from a theater, a local theater. That was his first time working on film.
Oh, that's so cool. But yeah, I think Denzel, like he's kind of very stoic, and like I kind of read that character as like he's someone like in his daily life doesn't really communicate with people often. Like he's more interior as a person, and not like he's introverted, but like he's the kind of character that if I don't have anything to say, I'm not going to say anything at all.
Yeah, definitely.
So I kind of read him as that way. Oh wait.
Sorry.
Shalini, where did you go?
I'm sorry, I'm here. I just had to plug in my charger. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, I kind of read him as being very because I know people like that. They're and it's not that they're being rude or anything, or that they're introverted. They're just like, I don't have anything to say, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, I think it is it is sort of something about generation, it is generational. It is how people access their emotions in certain generations, and in some ways it's an easier way for immigrants to divide their sort of like ancestry to this sort of new life. I think us as a generation are very much constantly questioning both of these identities that we have. Whereas maybe, first generation immigrants or other generations don't really ask themselves those questions as much.
Yeah, I think it like possibly has to do with like so kind of like a survival mechanism where it's like they're like, especially if you're moving to a country that is not anywhere close to similar to yours, you know, like we're like all I think it's interesting that all of us are immigrants and like we now live in North America or London and like it, when and it just the thought just occurred to me like these two areas of the West are colonialism central, you know, like and like that and like the where and like these two empires have changed the world so much, and especially for older generations, like my dad, he's lived all over the world. Like, he's lived in the Middle East, he's lived in Japan, he's lived here in Canada where I am now, and in America, and like he has a very different way of looking at the world as me and my sister do, because he is, and it's not that you keep your head down, but it's more as like you don't for him, like his generation is work is everything, you know, you got to work, you got to work, you got to work, you got to work. And for like I think our younger generations, we're more able to explore our creativity. Like your filmmakers now, editors, musicians, I'm a film critic, but like for their generation, they would have never thought of doing the things that we're able to do now, because they're like, if you're a doctor, go and work and be a doctor. If you're a nurse, go work and be a nurse, go and be a teacher, you know. Most of the expats from that generation were in very particular fields of work, you know, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers. And then when you become an immigrant, like you go working something like janitorial, you know, go and be an office assistant. And you're like, this is not what I went to school doing. This is not the job that I had in my homeland, but it's like a survival thing. And I got that from him, where like I imagine because of his age, he's faced a lot of obstacles. So he's learned how to like, you know, keep his head down and just do what he has to do.
Yeah, I think survival is the right word for it. I mean, this is someone who is more concerned with that, and I think that's why one of the first instances that he directly relates and sort of talks about the house is when he's on the phone to someone and he says, and his first thought is just about the monetary, practical elements of it, like, you know, the house isn't going to sell, it's a mess. And I think that's, you know, a character like that would be their initial reaction confronted with that situation, is just dealing with the practicalities. You know, how much is it going to cost me? How am I going to, you know, make this work? And the emotional connection is completely lost at first.
Yeah, and you only gets close to the emotional component, I think, close to the end, where he starts this, and this is where the real heart element of the film comes in, because he's lying there and the house is creaking, and it's like and it's funny to me because in the Caribbean we say like houses settle, you know, like when you build a new house, like it'll actually moan and groan for like maybe like a year or two, and we say the house is settling.
Oh,
And like that sound that house was making, it sounded almost like it was settling, but then you realize it starts to actually crumble, literally starts to crumble around him. And I'm like, this house is not selling, this house is about to collapse around him. And then you have the caretaker just standing there, like, you know, in a horror film where there's always someone standing there looking at the monster coming down on you, and like, why are you standing there? Run. And he's like, dude, he's like, Bunty, move. Bunty's just standing there in awe. Oh, look at the falls falling down. And he's like, Bunty, move. And he has to physically move him. But then when he steps up, when they step away from the house, this is where I think to me, I saw as this is the moment where he realizes there's nothing to salvage. It's all completely gone.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I've watched the film many times, and I still sort of feel it's quite heartfelt for me at the end, you know, when I think he kind of lets go a little bit, and also seeing the father's portrait right before that. You know, it is the moment that he actually has to confront his feelings towards the house, and it's
it's sad, like, because like once the house starts to fall like that, like it's very sad. And I gotta ask Hollie this question. For the so like I just said, this sound, to me it sounded like the sound was the sound of the house selling, but it's not. For you, where did you get the sound design for this? Because like like you hear the pieces of the wood crumbling and like you hear it start to break apart and everything. I think that's, to me, that's where the sound design is so super impressive in this film, because it feels like, for the audience, like, it feels like we're right there in that house, you know. It doesn't feel like we're watching from a distance. It feels like we're in the right there on the veranda with him and hearing this house start to fall apart, and it feels very I watched everything on my laptop, but I would swear that I was listening in a theater with surround sound. So I think that's like where I gotta commend you on like the sound design and everything for that, because like you guys, I think, did a fantastic job with the sound design and composition.
Well, I mean, I agree on the sound design front, but I wasn't actually the sound designer, so.
Yeah,
But
you did all the music and everything, and like it all comes through very clear.
yeah, I would definitely say with a soundtrack like this, the music and the sound blends, and it is quite hard to tell where one starts and the other stops, which was definitely the intention. And it was kind of, even though the music was kind of started before I saw a cut or any visuals, once the film was forming, as Anna's kind of said, it kind of tells you what it wants to be. And a lot of that for me was hearing the sound starting to develop, and all these creaks and all these amazing sort of like really like, I don't know, incredible visceral like moments with the house that you feel like it's a character. And definitely a lot of the details in the music, a lot of the textures and a lot of the organic elements did kind of get a lot of inspiration from that. And yeah, I would say like a lot of the subtle textures and even some of the louder ones as well, they're all kind of birthed from the really sort of, yeah, just visceral, intense and really unique sound aspects that the house has. Yeah.
I just want to and I just want to sort of commend Maiken as well for her work. So Maiken was the sound designer, and like Hollie, we sort of played around with a lot of sound in the early days, like thinking about what the termites would sound like. And I think in the beginning, it was easy to sort of put everything in there together, all of the sounds that we had, all of the music. And I think, I think the most skillful element of the sound design and the score was really working out the levels and the layering, because so much of it, there's so many layers there. But I think what the sound and the music does is it literally takes you on a journey. And so we did have to work a lot with the layering and bringing things up and then bringing them down and bringing them up, you know. So it was really something that also really came together in the mix.
Yeah, no, for the music, like Hollie, the thing with the music, like you said, you didn't really do the sound design, but I think as a composer, you have to make sure that your composition complements the sound design and it doesn't overwhelm it, because I think it could be almost fairly easy to like just like make the score like bigger than it needs to be, you know. Whereas for a film like this, the score has to be just right to complement the sound of not only the sound design of like the termites at our house, whatever, but to fit the mood of this character, because he is going on an emotional journey, and like he's going through this transition, I think, where like he's realizing, and I was saying, like his house is falling apart, and like your score has to complement everything that we're seeing. So especially at the end, I thought the end credits music is very kind of like eerie, you know. It feels almost like a what's next kind of situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're totally right. We had a lot of really brilliant, I think, ideas with sound and music. And as Shalini said, it was kind of the case of, okay, we've got a lot of things doing different stuff in the different frequency areas. What do we really want to take and kind of subtract on to really bring everything together? And yeah, it was a very interesting one. And I think you're absolutely right. With a film like this, it was super crucial for the music and the sound to give the world and the character space. And yeah, it was just a case of being kind of really tailoring what we wanted the film to say, and also kind of not say too much so that each person could go into it and give their own interpretation. I think with a film like this, it would be so easy for the music to be too heavy-handed. So we were very, very intentional with what we did, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it would also be really easy for the sound to be like too on the nose as well. And I think in a way, it's like we're talking about the termites have this language, and we kind of had to learn their language, and their language, come up with it and think about the subtleties of it. There's easily a version of this film where you would just hear, this one termite sound, and they're just like talking to each other, and but it wouldn't give it, it wouldn't give it the complexity and the sort of, the nature, the feeling of it being layered and being like an actual language.
Yeah, like they would. I was just thinking, what would they be saying? Oh, the humans, we need to destroy their homes.
Yeah.
But what would the termites be talking about? But for you, Anna, the thing that always interests me with short films, because I one of my things is I love speaking to creatives who make short films, is because short films have to be like I always say, like they have to tell a very concise story, and I think to me it must be harder to like make a short film, because you have to make sure you're telling this complete story, and like you have all of these scenes that you have to cut, and when you're cutting them, you're just thinking, wait, but this could actually expand upon this particular line of dialogue or something the character is doing, but you're like, no, we don't want to make we're not making a feature length film, this film it has to be like less than 20 minutes long, so we got to make sure everything. So for you as the editor, like what are the challenges but also the fun aspects of like creating a short film?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, as in this one, as Shalini mentioned, we had one instance of there being a little more background, a little more grounding in the story that we could have done with an extra character. And Shalini made the call. Actually, we very, very quickly we made that call that wasn't what we're going to do, and Shalini was very confident about that, and I fully was on board, because for this one it just I mean, we both felt it. I think that it's the right way to go. And apart from that, I think it was really, this one particularly was so well thought out. As I said before, there weren't really, it was more about getting the pace right within that scope, and then sounds especially, because we've got stamps from Mike and the sound designer, so we built a lot of it in a rough way during the edit, how that's going to be shaped, and then of course they changed it and mixed it later on. But in general, in shorts, yes, there are so many different shorts that I have cut, and they each present different challenges and like wildly different challenges, which is why I still enjoy doing shorts after having done some features as well, because you really can experiment, and there's really less pressure in terms of it being told in a certain way or appealing to certain people, and then you can just sort of go wild and try different things.
Great, thank you so much. So we're gonna wrap up now. So I like to ask my guests sometimes, like, what's next for all of you, because like you're doing your Sundance is wrapping up net, but what's next for you? Like Shalini, I really do think you should do a horror, because I think I think something the vein of a house made of wax or something like that. But like I think like what the three of you did like with this film, like it can be read and interpreted so many different ways, which I think is the beauty of filmmaking. It's all up to the audience, like you did your story and you're like, well, this is whatever you make of it is what you make of it. But what's next for the three of you?
So for the three of us, like I mentioned, I am working on a feature that I'm hoping to be shooting soon. And it definitely isn't a horror. It falls in a different space. It sort of feels a bit like more like a coming of age film, and it takes from my experiences spending my summers in India. I think I am in a place where I want to sort of explore my understanding of home and hopefully get it out of my system so that I can continue and continue to create other work. But I have to say that working on White and working with the sort of sci-fi, slightly horrific elements was so much fun for me that I am developing a film that sort of is a little bit more in the sci-fi space. So yeah. And yes, and so, you know, hopefully these two ladies are going to continue and work with me on the feature as well. So.
And for you, Hollie and Anna, what's next?
Yeah, I'm actually midway through a feature at the moment that's quite different. It's sort of a comedy. It's called Lady Parts, and it's about a woman that gets vaginismus. So it's quite different. And I'm actually working on my first debut album as like an artist. Like, so.
Oh, amazing. Looking forward to that.
So you know what, I kind of already knew this, but like I love film because of the collaborative aspect. When I'm just put up to my own devices to make my own decisions, I'm like, oh gosh, please someone tell me, help me. It's taking so much longer. Oh gosh, but yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
And for you, Anna?
Yeah, well, I'm attached to a couple of shorter projects, and then I am very much hoping that I'll be able to work with Shalini on her film, because I loved working with her, and hopefully we will collaborate again soon. And yeah, that's what I am doing.
Great, thank you so much, ladies, and congratulations on a successful showing and a successful Sundance that you made it through. I know film festivals are hard work for film creatives to do, so you made it. Yay!
Yeah, thank you so much, and also thanks for like your questions and your attention to detail. It's amazing. It just is really wonderful to see someone I think connect with work in the way that you do. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.